Welcome back to the Politics Panel. Joining me are Cherylyn Harley LeBon, Patrick Howley, and Ben Cohen. And let's get back to it. The Voting Rights Act. The Supreme Court is going to hear a case tomorrow challenging Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act. And currently, this map, which is up on the screen here, shows what areas of the country are covered by Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act. If the court strikes the law down, there'll be no protection for minority voters in these states, at least no federal protection. Given what we've seen with voter suppression ID laws, shouldn't we not only be maintaining Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, but expanding it? Patrick, you're bouncing.
Well, I mean, can't we talk about the discrimination that map shows? That I mean, those are red states right there. There's not a whole lot.
Yeah, it's the old Confederacy. Those are all the states where there were demonstrations in the 1960s by those states that they were willing to engage in suppression of racial minorities.
It's not that minorities aren't going to be protected in those states at all. It's that, I mean, under the Voting Rights Act right now, which was reauthorized, what, a couple years ago, those states cannot make any, it's virtually impossible for those states to make any changes to the way that they conduct their elections like all other states can.
They can make changes, they just have to be pre-approved by the Justice Department. I think in this day and age, and that's discriminatory against those states. So let's just take it nationwide.
So in full disclosure, a group that I'm a part of, Project 21, we actually submitted an amicus brief on this. And what the media is not talking about is the fact that this Section 5, these pre-clearance standards, applies to these states from 1965 standards and demographics.
I agree.
So that is something.
We're seeing suppression of minority voters now in Michigan.
But let's talk about, but funny, that's not in there. Okay?
I know, so that's what I'm saying. Let's take the whole thing nationwide.
That is my whole point, is you have to look at the demographics that have changed. And one of the counties, it's 85% white, okay? So this doesn't even apply from 1965 standards. You're applying them to modern day when the demographics have changed.
So you're suggesting do away with it?
No. All we're asking the court to do, at least Project 21, is to look at Section 5 and apply it to modern day standards instead of applying 1965 demographics.
How do you identify the places now where that's a
very good point, Tom.
Let me finish this question first. We have a graph that shows who has ID in the United States, the kind of ID that's required now by numerous states. This is the American Legislative Exchange Council sponsored legislation. And what we find is that a quarter of African Americans in the United States do not have ID that would make them legal voters in states like Wisconsin and Michigan. 20% of Asians, 19% of Latinos, 18% of college-age students, 18% of seniors, 15% of people earning less than $35,000 a year, 11%, pretty much everybody, and only 8% of whites. This, just the voter ID thing seems to me racially discriminatory. And this is being done largely in northern states, in the blue states that have been captured by Republican governors. Shouldn't this come under
it's also being
Section 5?
In South Carolina and Texas. Let's talk for a minute about voter ID. In several states, the states have said, we will offer significantly reduced price for voter ID, or it will be free. So states have gone above and beyond the duty to make sure that it is a process, an easier process.
You're still saying to people who don't have cars or who are elderly or who are
you need to let me finish.
Students.
States are saying we will help our citizens and our residents get voter IDs. In fact, in Georgia, when they passed the voter ID, they found that black voter turnout increased. Funny the media doesn't want to talk about that.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of people who were very outraged that there was a serious attempt by Republicans to suppress their vote. But let me get the other folks here, if I may.
Tom, I'm just saying that the evidence is against that does not reveal that. In fact, Georgia saw black voter turnout increase after they passed voter ID. That is totally goes against what the liberals and Democrats have argued.
I'm interested to know whether you think that voter ID, were you an advocate of that? Do you think
I am very much in support of voter ID.
Why?
I think that having voter ID allows each vote to be validated, because that means that someone cannot come along behind me and vote as Cherylyn Harley LeBon. And that's important. In fact, I have a father from the Deep South, so I know all about voter discrimination and suppression of the black vote.
Please correct me if I'm wrong, but I wasn't aware that there were any legitimate cases of voter fraud.
Yes, there are several legitimate cases. There have been, I don't have the exact number, but it's happened in Indiana, it's happened in Illinois.
The Al Franken election in Minnesota.
How many people was that? In compared to something like voter suppression,
Ben, let me just give you another instance.
More people in America die from having televisions fall on their head every year than are prosecuted for.
Yeah, it's a manufactured problem.
It's not manufactured. Actually, let me just give you another example.
Can I just step in for 1 second?
But you're asking me for examples. I'm trying to give you to you.
Okay, but we saw the demographics of minorities who don't have these IDs, right?
And I've also explained that states are making it easier
for the Democrats. So why do you think, if I was going to suppress the vote, that's exactly what I would do. I would look through the demographics and say, right, who doesn't have voter IDs? Right, minorities. Okay, let's require everybody to have voter IDs. Right, it's a very, very clear and blatant tactic to suppress the vote.
Patrick,
isn't that a social problem?
It's so obvious
that a social problem that the Democrats should be concerned about, that they don't have voter IDs? Why don't they have voter IDs?
So why aren't they supporting it? Why isn't the NAACP doing voter drives? If they're so concerned about...
Yeah, if it was a huge problem, I'm still waiting for these numbers. I'm still waiting for these numbers.
Let me give you another example. Lasadella Sowers, who was a former NAACP official in Mississippi, was convicted of 11 counts of voter fraud.
Yeah, that's one of those.
I'm just giving you an example.
One of those.
You haven't heard of her.
My point is, more people die from televisions falling on their heads than are prosecuted, much less convicted for voter ID violations.
Voter fraud. He asked the question. Voter fraud is happening. Indiana, Minnesota, Illinois, Mississippi.
No.
But it could.
So are you saying that it's not? Are you saying these examples I'm giving you are not valid?
I am absolutely saying it's not. George W. Bush spent $70 million. He had 93 federal prosecutors. 7 of them refused to go along. They got fired, remember? He had 93 federal prosecutors, $74 million over a 6 or 7 year period looking for those illegal voters. They found 38 of them in 6 years.
38 is a national crisis.
And that 38 people, of those 38 people, about 30 of them were people who had been convicted of felonies. And in many states, once you're off parole, you can go back to vote. And those people thought they could go back to vote, and they didn't know that they couldn't.
So not that many people are breaking the law, so it's a bad law? So it's a bad law? So
it's not a bad law.
No, but let's just be honest about what it is. Let's just be honest about what it is. It's a way of suppressing the vote.
It's a way of
stopping minorities and young people from voting.
Not everyone in this country is a registered voter, and you have to be a registered voter to get into the polls. So doesn't it make sense that you have to show an ID, you have to show some proof of who you are before you go in and take part in the democratic process?
And I really don't see what's wrong with validating a vote.
If it was a problem, but it's not a problem.
Why do 25% of African Americans not have a voter ID?
I'm sorry?
Why do 25% of African Americans not have a voter ID?
Because a long legacy of racial discrimination in this country.
What's that have to do with voter ID?
Has left a lot of those people in that community without jobs, without income. The net wealth of African Americans, the average African American family in the United States is around $5,000.
But what does that have to do with getting ID? Tom,
because they don't own cars, so they're not,
So you can
I don't own a car now.
So you can still get an ID if you don't have a car.
But if you don't need it, why are you going to take a whole day off work and go out and get a ride someplace to
As I already said,
find your birth certificate and do this whole saga?
What, you're saying that people don't have birth certificates? Everyone has a birth certificate, and if you can't
I just had to go through the process of getting my birth certificate.
One.
It is a major hassle, and it cost me $75. If I was a poor person and I didn't need the ID for any other purpose than to vote, then I'd probably say, screw it, I'm not going to vote.
If you are a poor person,
and that's what the Republicans are planning.
If you are a poor person getting any type of federal aid, whether it be unemployment or perhaps Medicaid, you do have an ID because the government does require that you show some sort of proof of ID in order to get some type of government benefits.
Here is some sort of ID is very different than these specifically mandated
photo
IDs.
ID. Photo ID is required in order to get a lot of these benefits.
Here is the essence of this. This legislation was put forward by the American Legislative Exchange Council. They're the ones who brought it into the states. ALEC was founded back in the late 1970s by a fellow by the name of Paul Weyrich. Paul Weyrich helped run the Republican. Weyrich, you're right. Helped run the Reagan campaign was one of the co-founders of the Heritage Foundation, and here he is in 1980 telling us his thoughts on this issue.
Now, many of our Christians have what I call the goo-goo syndrome. Good government. They want everybody to vote. I don't want everybody to vote. Elections are not won by a majority of people. They never have been from the beginning of our country, and they are not now. As a matter of fact, our leverage in the elections, quite candidly, goes up as the voting populace goes down.
He didn't say anything about race.
Right.
He didn't say anything about race.
And guess what? Let me tell you, another group, ACORE, founded by a community organizer, former profession of our president, guess what they were doing? They were committing fraud in voting in elections.
Actually, they were not.
Yes,
I don't want the
completely-
people
that's
in
completely
Jay
false.
Leno's Men on the Street segment who don't know who the vice president is. I don't want those people voting. That has nothing to do with race.
So
You're inserting
wanna,
race into a comment that
Patrick
just
wants to
wasn't
bring
there.
back
The Democrats
literacy
insert
tests.
race. I'm sorry?
You want to bring back literacy tests?
Literacy?
Well,
yeah.
I don't want to bring back a literacy test, but there are a lot of uninformed people going to the polls, and you know what? That
That's
does,
It might be a good
the nature
idea.
of
It might be a good idea. I mean, you're born in this country, you have a right to vote here. I mean, that's how it works.
Right.
And if the voter ID law,
We're
these
talking about
voter ID
political
laws.
strategy.
Yeah, I mean, look, but can we just at least look, maybe in an idealistic world, the voter ID is a good idea, right? Having an ID to show that you prove that you live in this country,
Absolutely.
right?
Yes.
Hypothetically speaking, in an ideal world, right? But can you just admit that it's a political tactic? Can you at least admit
No,
that
I'm
from a
not going
Republican
to
point of
admit
view?
that at all.
So why are the
I think
Republicans
having-
pushing it?
Inserting race into this
Republicans
conversation
care about
is
voting
a
rights.
political
When have
tactic.
Republicans cared about voting rights?
Inserting
Well,
race
I might
into
say
it
the
is a
Democrats
political
didn't
tactic.
care about voting rights because it was the white Democrats who blocked and filibustered the Civil Rights Act of 1965.
Okay, but these are
Since
labels,
I have
okay?
a degree in history and I'm an American and my father's from the Deep
You are
South,
right,
I happen to know a
Cherylyn,
lot about it.
And those
So-
Democrats were reached out to by Richard Nixon with his Southern strategy, and he said, "Come on over and become Republicans."
Republicans, right,
And all
so-
those Dixiecrats, all those Southern white racist Democrats, they call themselves Republicans.
It's a
now.
disingenuous argument. It's a
No,
disingenuous
excuse me, Ben, it's not a disingenuous argument. It's the facts and it's history of this country,
we have to
which
rack it
I'm
up.
well
We'll leave
aware of.
Cherylyn with the last word. Cherylyn Harley LeBon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick Howley, and Ben Cohen. Thank you all very much.